The New York Times has authenticated emails that appear to have come from a laptop abandoned by Hunter Biden in Delaware. The president previously said that the New York Post story about this was a bunch of garbage and that it was a Russian plant. Does he stand by that assessment?
I pointed the Department of Justice and also to Hunter Biden's representatives. He doesn't work in the government. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. If I may, you asked about Hunter Biden's laptop. You also, in October 2020, dismissed it as Russian disinformation. Do you stand by that assessment?
Again, I pointed to the Department of Justice and Hunter Biden's representatives. I'm a spokesperson for the United States. He doesn't work for the United States. Go ahead.
I've got a quick clarification and then two questions about presidential conflicts of interest in foreign affairs. The first brief clarification is the New York Times reported this week that the first son remains under criminal investigation. Does the president still intend to stay out of that case?
Yes, it's the Department of Justice, and I will point you to them.
And my two questions about conflicts of interest in foreign affairs. First, I have a question about Russia, and then one about China. On Russia, you told me last year that you were unfamiliar with the Senate report that alleged that the first son, or a company linked to the first son, received $3.5 million from the richest woman in Russia. Subsequent reporting indicates that President Biden, when he was vice president, had a dinner in Georgetown with the same woman in 2015. This Yelena Ballerina, she has not been sanctioned yet by the U.S. government. How is President Biden navigating conflicts of interest when it comes to sanctioning people who have done business with his family? And can you explain to us what this $3.5 million was for?
I don't have any confirmation of the accuracy of that report, so I have no more further details.
Anything about the conflicts of interest, though, how he's navigating those when deciding sanctions?
What would be his conflicts of interest?
Well, his son's company allegedly got $3.5 million from...
Which I have no confirmation of, and he has continued to sanction oligarchs more than we've ever sanctioned in the past, so I'm not sure that's a conflict of interest. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a question about Russia now.
I think we're moving on because we got to get some more people. Go ahead.
My question about the conflict of interest when it comes to China is, last year the first son's attorney said that he divested from a Chinese investment fund controlled by Chinese state-owned entities. We have received not even basic transparency about who bought out his stake, when this happened, and how much money changed hands. Did he actually divest, and if so, can you agree to basic transparency?
He's a private citizen. He doesn't work for the government. I'd point you to his representatives. Thank you. I think we're done here. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
And just to follow up on Weij's question, you guys are adding more sanctions, saying that the sanctions are going to take time to have an impact. How much time do you guys think that these innocent Ukrainians have?
Well, I think what's important to note here is sanctions are just one component of the tools that we have at our disposal. What we are doing, and we're already seeing effectively happen, is the financial system in Russia is near the brink of collapse. I mean, they're projecting 15% inflation, a contraction of 15% in their economy. Private sector businesses are pulling out of the country. It is more and more difficult for President Putin to fund this war every single day. That has an impact. But what we're also doing is providing a historic amount of military and security assistance, which is what they've been using effectively over the last few weeks to fight this war and push back the Russians.
But do you guys assess that anything you've done so far has prevented a war crime from happening?
Well, Peter, I would say that everything we're doing to date is to support the Ukrainians in this war and in this effort. And that is something the president's proud of, we are proud of, including rallying and leading the global community in standing up against Russia.
Okay, on another topic, a lot of stories about Hunter Biden surfacing this week. So to ensure the independence of the investigation, would the president support the appointment of a special counsel?
Well, first, the president has never had a conversation with the Department of Justice about any investigations into any member of his family. He said that during the campaign, and he will continue to abide by that. So I'd point you to the Department of Justice for any additional steps they would take. They would make those decisions independently.
Is there any concern that they're not going to be necessarily seen as being able to make the decisions independently if the White House Chief of Staff is out saying that the president is confident his son did not break the law?
Well, that's something the president has said, and certainly we would echo. But in the same answer to that question, Peter, during an interview this week on ABC, Ron Klain also said the Justice Department is independent and they will make their own decisions.
And the president has said that he never spoke to his son about his overseas business dealings. Is that still the case?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. On Title 42, we've heard you guys say that this is a public health order, it's not an immigration order, it's the CDC's decision. But yesterday, members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus who met with the president relayed some of what he expressed in that meeting. And one of them said that the president told the group that he was looking forward to lifting Title 42, describing it as an excuse to keep people out of the country and anti-immigrant. Is the president really wanting Title 42 to go away because it was a Trump-era policy?
Well, the president has never felt that Title 42 was an effective immigration policy, and he talked about that during the campaign. But the authority has always rested in the CDC to make that determination. And he left the CDC to make that determination, unlike his predecessor about a range of decisions. So the president has never made a secret of the fact that he thinks immigration reform is necessary and that Title 42 was never a replacement for comprehensive immigration reform. That would put in place smarter security, that would ensure there was an asylum processing system that worked, and that is something he would be eager to work with anyone on to get done.
So if this conditions warranted it, would the White House want to see the CDC reimpose Title 42 in the instance that the cases are up and the metrics that they use to measure that warrant that decision?
Well, the CDC, again, has the authority to make a determination about what the health conditions warrant. So we will leave it to them to make any decisions or recommendations.
And then with the vice president being out, obviously she's broken a lot of ties for votes, and then we have Senators, I believe, Wyden and Murphy also out. Is there any concern about ability to get confirmations through this week with her absence?
Well, I would say there are also some Democrats who have announced that they have also tested positive for COVID. You may be referring to the Federal Reserve nominees or others. That is something that members and leaders will work through in Congress. We are confident we have the votes to get them confirmed. We're eager to have them in place. But of course, we need all members there to do that.
And I had one follow-up on Dr. Jha, something that he said earlier.
Sure.
We've talked about the administration surging resources to the border, including resources to vaccinate migrants. And the last time I asked about this, I believe your answer was something along the lines of, we have enough funding and supply to take care of the 23 sites that DHS is going to be running to get migrants vaccinated and also take care of uninsured Americans. But it sounded in his answer like that might not be the case anymore. So are we in a place now where there might be a choice where people would have to choose, or the administration would have to choose between supplying resources to migrants coming across the border versus taking care of uninsured Americans?
I'm happy to check on those resources, Jackie. I would say that our broad concern about COVID funding is based on a couple of issues that he talked about. One of them is making sure that we are ahead of the world on being able to order ahead, primarily, a lot of different treatments that will help ensure that we have the best vaccines, the best boosters, enough supply once individuals under 50 are eligible. And certainly we want to keep all of our programs running across the country.
And I just have one more on the Hunter Biden reporting that we've seen come out. Does the president still maintain that he never spoke with his son about his business dealings? And given this reporting on Eric Schwerin, does he also say that he has never spoken to his son's business partners about his son's business dealings?
He maintains his same statements that he's made in the past. I would say, I know you're referring to Waves records that were released more than 10 years ago. I really don't have more detail or information on them. I'd note that there was a gap when Waves records were not released, but I don't have more information about visits from more than 10 years ago. Go ahead. Oh, well, let me go around to people who haven't got it. Go ahead.
On the disinformation board.
Sure.
Yesterday, you had told me that you were not familiar with Nina Jankowicz. I'm wondering if you have more information on her today. Also, Secretary Mayorkas said that he was not familiar with statements that she had made surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. And I'm just wondering, how is she hired if you in the White House are not familiar with her, if Mayorkas is not familiar with her statements? What's the process for putting her into a position like this? Who's in charge of her hire?
Well, let me give you a sense of who she is. She's an expert on online disinformation. She was formerly in the Wilson Center's she was formerly a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center. She's testified before Congress as well as the United Kingdom and European Parliament, advised a Ukrainian foreign minister, particularly relevant in this moment, under the auspices of a Fulbright Public Policy Fellowship and overseeing Russia and Belarus programs at the National Democratic Institute. Any hiring decisions are up to the Department of Homeland Security, but this is a person with extensive qualifications. What I will tell you about the board and what the board is doing, this is a continuation of work that began at the Department of Homeland Security in 2020 under former President Trump.
Is it, though, I guess, can you describe what her job is going to be? Because there's been some TikToks that she has put out, and it seems like rather than, calling balls and strikes on this, story is false, and this story, and here's the truth on it, one line stood out to me. They're laundering disinfo. We should really take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. So
well, here's what the board is going to do, which I think is of particular interest. Again, a continuation of the work of the former president. So for anyone who's critical of it, I didn't hear them being critical of the work under the former president, which is just interesting to note contextually. But in the fact sheet that they put out, what they noted yesterday, what they noted in there is that this is meant to, one, the first bullet was about protecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the First Amendment. They said the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd also note that the first example they gave about what they're going to do is support the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing work back to the former administration to address how and understand how misinformation spread by human smugglers that prey on vulnerable populations attempting to migrate to the United States. There's no question, everybody, that bipartisan support for that, to address disinformation that's helping smugglers, helping people migrate, or providing false information, prompting people to migrate. This is also work that is helping to address unauthorized terrorism, other threats, and see how disinformation and misinformation is being pushed to lead to increase those. So that's all work. We think is work that's been ongoing for some time. This is the form it's taking, and there's a fact sheet that details the specifics of it.
You just outlined a lot of efforts that sound very worthy, but you've got someone from the Department of Homeland Security telling people how they should vote. How do you explain that to critics who say that doesn't sound right to me?
This is an individual who will be overseeing the work of that board. Personnel decisions are up to the Department of Homeland Security. I just outlined the extensive history and background this individual has, but I think what's important to note here is what the board is doing, which is continuing what is important disinformation-related work that began under the former administration. Go ahead.
Know that DHS is putting together this disinformation governance board.
Well, Peter, I think I would note, and I'm not sure if this has been in your reporting yet, but this is a continuation of work that was done under the prior administration, under the Trump administration, to take steps to address disinformation, address the use of disinformation in helping smugglers prompt the movement of more migrants across to the border. I would note that the first example given in the announcement about this was DHS's work to understand how, quote, misinformation spread by human smugglers that prey on vulnerable populations attempting to migrate to the United States. So for anyone who's out there who may be concerned about the increase in migrants to the border, this is the kind of apparatus that's working to address disinformation. And again, continuing the work of the Department of Homeland Security in 2020, something we're currently applauding.
But just in terms of what the president wants out of this, does he want the people on this board to start censoring information that is not helpful to him?
Well, let me be clear on exactly what this board does, or what the work they are doing does. And in their announcement, which is publicly available on the Department of Homeland Security website for anyone to read, it says, quote, the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the right to free speech.
But, okay, there's this woman, Nina Jankowicz, who is going to be in charge of the board. She has said that she thinks the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. So should we look forward in the future to her censoring internet traffic about the Hunter Biden laptop?
I think I noted exactly what the objective of the board is, including continuing the work of the prior administration. And the woman you noted has extensive experience and has done extensive work addressing disinformation. She has testified before Congress, testified in Europe. She has worked closely with the Ukrainians and has unique expertise, especially at this moment we're facing. Go ahead.